everyone. This is my presentation for Broadway musicals. So the years in history: in 1750, the first Broadway theater by Thomas Keene and Walter Murray opened a theater company on Nassau Street. In 1826, the Bowery Theater was built. More theaters were being built, mostly as blackface minstrels, which I'll talk about in later slides. In 1849, the Astor Place Theater opened, and it caused a riot between the lower class and the upper class because the upper class got offended because the lower class was able to attend their theaters, and so this separated theater in New York by upper class going to opera, middle class going to melodramas and minstrels. The lower class goes to the variety show. More history. At the start of the 20th century, Princess Theater became popular, and it was shows written by Victor Herbert, Guy Bolton, and P.G. Wodehouse that were staged in modern times. In 1919, production started to slow down when motion pictures had sound, but after the Great Depression, Broadway musicals hit a new high with many blockbuster hits. The influence. Broadway musicals was influenced by the music of the time, so like the Roaring Twenties was a big influence on Broadway. For example, one of the Broadway influences from the 1920s was the song called "Look for the Silver Lining" by from the musical Sally, but this is the film version from 1929.
I know it must seem discouraging.
It never seems.
Please don't be offended if I preach to you a while. Years are out of place in eyes that were meant to smile. There's a way to make your very biggest trouble.
So you can see how that kind of music is a lot different from music today. Instruments. In Broadway musicals, they have this thing called a pit orchestra, which, as you can see in the photo, is it's the lower front stage, and it's just kind of like basically carved out, and that's where the musicians play. And in the early Baroque and classical period, there's 30 musicians, but it also it could have gone to like 100 musicians in the Wagnerian opera period, but mostly today it's like 15 to 30 musicians. So this was a pit orchestra in the Baroque period. You can see them in the lower fronts. So voices. There are 4 main types of singing in Broadway, and one of them is legit, and it's more of a traditional and has classic voice training and styles. Most often associated with Broadway's golden age, and that from 1943 to 1964. Famous singers are Julie Andrews, Alfred James, Barbara Cook, and John Ratt. Famous shows: The Light in the Piazza, Grey Gardens, and A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. Number 2 is traditional music theater, but it's nicknamed Belt. It came from the Tin Pan Alley in the early 20th century. Incorporates both genders, meaning chest voice and a chest mixed voice. Famous singers include George Cohan, Ethel Merman, George Burnett, and Joel Grey. Famous shows: Cabaret, Chicago, City of Angels, and The Producers. The third type is contemporary musical theater, and it combines characteristics of the second one, which was the nickname Belt, singing with contemporary pop rock and influences, and it had speech-based and frequently requires higher belting than traditional music theater. Famous singers are Sutton Foster, Norbert Leo Boots, Sherry Renee Scott, and Christian Borle. Famous shows include Wicked, Avenue Q, and Thoroughly Modern Millie. And the last type is pop rock, and this is influenced by commercial music vocal styles like pop, rock, country, hip hop, and others. And it's empathetic, reactive, and emotional based. Men and women sing in the similar range. And famous singers are Adam Pascal, Heather Headley, Aaron Tveit, and Jesse Mueller. And famous shows include Rent, Spring Awakening, Next to Normal, and Once. Here are some of the famous Broadway musicals posters. Broadway stars. I'll have pictures of these stars in the next slide. Eddie Cantor, he made his Broadway debut in 1917, and went on to star on film, radio, and television. Marilyn Miller, she was one of the biggest Broadway stars in the 20s and 30s. George M. Cohan, he was an actor, playwright, composer, and producer, and he was widely known as a man who owned Broadway. And Bernadette Peters, she's an actress, singer, and children's books author. She has starred in musical theater, television, performed in solo concerts, and released recordings. She has won many awards, including 2 Tony Awards, she had 7 nominations, 3 Drama Desk Awards, which she had 9 nominations, and 4 of the Broadway cast albums she starred in won 4 Grammy Awards. So here are the Broadway musicians I just showed in the last slide. And kind of fun fact, Bernadette Peters was in one of the episodes of Grey's Anatomy, so that was cool. What was happening in the country? So Broadway musicals kind of started from the 1750s. So I did like a really brief history, which I'm obviously not going to read them all, but I'll share my presentation with you guys, and so if you're interested, you can read them. But in 1776, U.S. had full independence. 1863, Emancipation Declaration. 1914, Panama Canal was built. 1920, 19th Amendment ratified, and 1963, JFK was assassinated, and then 1968, Martin Luther was assassinated. So those are just a couple of really important history moments. How did the music affect people? Well, in the 21st century, Hamilton, along with other shows, is one of the most impactful Broadway performances. So Hamilton is a story of founding fathers told with people of color, like the founding fathers were told with people of color, and this gave them people a chance to tell a story they often feel left out of. And here is a little clip of Hamilton.
Hi, I'm quiet. Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. But no control lives who dies and who tells your story. I know that we can win. I know that greatness lies in you. But remember, from here on in, history has its eyes.
Okay, so that's a little bit of Hamilton. The next one was Funhouse, and this was impactful. This was impactful because it was the first ever show with a lesbian protagonist, and Funhouse won the 2015 Tony for Best Musical.
In this panel, me and my dad in a diner.
Where's Betty?
She went home. Lorna's on now.
Caption: my dad and I both grew up in the same small Pennsylvania town.
Oh.
And I didn't know it, but both of us were gay.
Where's your beret?
And we were exactly alike.
Put it back in.
So that's a little bit of that. The next one was Dear Evan Hansen, and this is a boy with social anxiety, and it helps break the stigma around mental illness.
I've learned to slam on the brake before I even turn the key, before I make the mistake, before I lead with the worst of me. Give them no reason to stare, no slipping up if you slip away. So I got nothing to share. No, I got nothing to say. Step out of the sun.
So that's a little bit of that one. And these are just a few Broadway shows that have made people feel welcomed with their differences and feel like they are not alone. So here are pictures from those shows. Okay, blackface on Broadway. Here's a quote from Mandel, and it said, "It's indisputable that the minstrels show was rooted in virulent racism." And these kind of shows were called blackface minstrels. And unfortunately, these kind of shows were very popular in their time. But here's a video that shows a little bit more.
So Lit Mobile just sent me this solar wireless battery pack. I'm excited. Let's see what's inside. I really like it.
And deeply ingrained in our culture.
Who was that lady I saw you with this afternoon? That was no lady. That was my wife.
Even Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd blacked up.
Fantastic, isn't it?
For more than 100 years, white and then black performers wore dark makeup and created not only a popular theatrical form, but stereotypes that are still with us today. This makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it?
So that was blackface from Broadway, which is an unfortunate side of Broadway's history. Here are some pictures. Whereas Broadway musicals played, obviously it's played mostly in New York, which is kind of like the Broadway hometown, I guess you could say. But there's 41 theaters in Broadway of Broadway music. There's 41 theaters in New York that play Broadway. So these are two of them. Lighting in Broadway. In the 19th century, theater was lit by gas, and that was really dangerous because it was also poorly ventilated. So in the 20th century, architects decided to switch to the electric light bulb because it was so much safer. So the lighting in Broadway became so much brighter. The streets became a lot brighter, and that's when 41st up to 33rd, 53rd Street became known as the Great White Way. So some fun facts. The Phantom of the Opera is the longest running Broadway show. In 2020, it would be 32 years. Broadway is the longest street in New York. The Lion King is the highest grossing Broadway show. There are 41 theaters in New York. The Palace Theater is said to be haunted. 66% of Broadway audiences are women, and no one knows how Aladdin's flying carpet is in the air. And because it's obviously up in the air, but just no one knows how. That's in the audience. And there's no I in Broadway, as in no seating row I. That's it. Thank you so much for watching or viewing my presentation. It ran a little long, but there was so much to cover. So thank you for watching.